Awesome. So, again, first of all, thank you so much for making the time to speak with us. Really appreciate it. I know you're a really busy one, so getting you on the call to speak with us is really a privilege. And for those who are tuning in, if you don't know Joel, then you're really, really missing out because if you don't know Joel, I heard of you back in 2022, the time when you launched an offer with Alan Sultanic on like the podcast vs. So when I got an email from him that okay, he's going live with you guys are going to be doing a free training on podcast vs. So that's where I started like following you, seeing what you're doing, and right now, you've been able to generate hundreds of millions of US dollars for your clients. And we recently launched a case study where you talked about breaking down your system on how you made $500,000 using only a $27 product. That's really amazing. So thank you again for the call. So the first thing that comes in mind right now is like, why digital products? Why digital products? Why didn't you go into corporate, etc.? And let's we can then take it from there.
Sure. So, you asking like how I got into online marketing, copywriting? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I got back into it, or I not got back into it, but I got into it kind of out of necessity. Um, in 2013, I started reading books on entrepreneurship. Uh, like many people, the 4 Hour Work Week was kind of like the gateway for me into entrepreneurship. Even though it's not really a book on entrepreneurship, it was really a book on outsourcing and a handful of other things. But the main thing that I took away from that book was email marketing, and it wasn't even like a major thing that it talked about, but it talked about like building an email list, and I was still working for a corporate company at that time, so I wasn't even an entrepreneur, but I wanted to create some products. I wanted to make some money online. And after reading that book, I got the idea of writing my own little mini book and selling it for, I don't know, like $10. Like I thought that was going to be my ticket to freedom. The book that I wrote ended up doing very well, but it was extremely niche. I was
Mm,
serving a very small subset of engineers. So, engineers that were taking the engineering licensing exam. So, the book that I wrote was a guide on how I passed the first stage of the engineering licensing exam using a unique process, a unique methodology. And it worked for me. So, I wanted to teach other people what it was. The book was called 30-Minute EIT. I wrote it in bed over the course of a handful of nights, and it was like 30 pages, 40 pages,
mm,
very, very small. And launched it, did okay. I was making a handful of sales every single day, but, you know, I didn't have anything else to offer. Like there was
yeah.
no strategic design of like, oh, I'll offer consulting or tutoring or any sort of private coaching. I just thought I was going to make millions of dollars selling a $10 ebook on Amazon. And so I launched it and then quickly realized like, oh, okay, like it's making a couple of sales a day. And I needed to learn, the principles of marketing to kind of get the word out, um, design sales funnels. And that became like the entry point for me into internet marketing and
Mm,
funnels. So fast forward, a couple of years, I had hired a couple of mentors, learned more about digital marketing, learned more about funnel building, learned more about, advertising, and I fell in love with it. I really enjoy writing, and I'm probably it's one of my stronger skill sets.
mm,
And so once I started learning the principles of like direct response marketing, like, oh, this is how you get people to actually take action. I fell in love with it because it became an automated sales pilot. Like once you get ads that are converting, I mean, you can basically print money.
mm,
Now, so I really started to fall in love with it. I studied Dan Kennedy. I studied a lot of direct response marketers. I studied newer age direct response marketers. My first, coach that I hired was Russell Brunson back in
mm,
2014 as he launched ClickFunnels. Like he launched a little coaching group. I joined that, and he got me introduced to online webinars, online sales presentations. In my corporate world, that's what I was doing all the time. I was giving sales presentations. So, like, I was familiar with it, I was pretty good at it, and I just naturally kind of transitioned and converted what I was doing there into the webinar agency. That was the first real company that I launched. So that was how I got into the world of direct response marketing. And one thing leads to another. You start studying other funnels. You start studying other acquisition systems,
Mhm.
low ticket, high ticket, mid ticket. Email marketing. It's all interconnected, and I enjoy it. I really, really enjoyed it. And it all comes down to principles of like how do you communicate effectively through writing. And so that was really my origin story of getting started in online marketing.
Nice, nice. And when you spoke about Russell Brunson, one thing that I remember from like doing my research is you worked with Russell Brunson, so you learned from someone, and then at the same time, he became like the go-to person. Even he even mentioned in his book, Expert Secret, that you are the go-to guy for for like webinars. So how did that happen? You learning from Russell to becoming the go-to person that he started like referring you people to.
Well, so he's a client of mine. So he ended up hiring me to work on a couple of webinars for him. This is back. I mean, he probably hired me. I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago,
Mm,
something like that. And so how that all came to be is he still talks about webinars to this day as like the greatest thing ever.
mm,
And while I don't, um, disagree with him, I have different standpoints on like who should use a webinar, when they should use a webinar, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, in his coaching program, he was directing, I would say, almost all of his clients to do a webinar. He's like, you
mm,
need to do a webinar. You need to do a webinar. You need to do a webinar. So there were 100 or so of us in this coaching program, and he would be telling these people to go do a webinar, but he's not reviewing every single webinar. Like he's not helping them build a webinar that would be impossible for 100 clients. And so once I started to do webinar, I did a webinar for one of the coaching clients in there, and we crushed it. And so that kind of started to build some momentum. That client started telling everyone in the coaching group, like, "Hey, Joel's awesome. He
mm,
helped me take this webinar from being not performing at all to, I think we increased his sales by 14 fold. So like
mm,
1400%, like in one like the first iteration that we did. So word started to get around, and so other people started reaching out to me like, "Hey, can you help me with my webinar?" I'm like, "Sure." So I would do that over and over and over and over and over again. I ended up running a coaching cohort within Russell's group where I would, do these weekly calls. I'd break down people's webinars. And so I just built a name for myself inside of that group. And that started to build my reputation. And I would land, a bunch of clients in there. It was unintentional. That wasn't my goal because
mm,
initially when I joined the coaching program, like I wanted Russell's help to help me build my engineering programs. And so, one thing led to another. I'm like, there's way more money, way more opportunity for me to help other people in marketing
mm,
and with webinars. So that's how I became the go-to guy. I was running coaching calls for him, reviewing his clients' webinars that would turn into consulting clients and private clients. And then he ended up hiring me for a couple of his webinars. So, you know, he wrote about me in the book. He gave me a testimonial. I love Russell to death. I think he's probably the biggest influencer in the online marketing space of our generation.
mm,
He's done a lot of positive things for this industry and really growing it, and he is at the forefront of making that happen. So that is how I became the go-to guy. It was through just a lot of hard work, to be honest,
mm,
and putting my best foot forward. You know, serving without asking for anything in return, and just really being in the right place at the right time.
mm. That's really amazing. And you like breaking down, you going into someone's group and actually providing value. It's not something that you see a lot of people do at this point. And one of the things that came into mind was you said you were doing like engineering stuff, and then it's like walk us through like the transition, because getting into entrepreneurship is really scary for most people. They are having their day job and then having to transition into something that is not really stable. How did you get to that stage? What was your mindset? What was your state of mind during that time? Do you have to speak with your wife, and like what was that conversation like?
Yeah, before I made the leap, I remember sitting down with my wife. We went out to dinner one night, and I was still working my day job. and it was when I saw an ad for Russell's coaching program. Right, I still remember the ad. I have total recall of what that ad looked like, and it's pretty incredible because it was a pivotal moment for me as a as an entrepreneur. I was in my mid 20s at the time. I really had this urge to go do something else. Like my corporate job was fine. I was making good money there, but it was very, very stressful. I wanted to make sure that once we started to have a family, I could be home for them. And so that was the motivating driver for me. Like I didn't want to be traveling all the time. I was having health issues in my mid 20s from my
Mm.
day job. Like I was sleepwalking, I was not getting good sleep at all, constantly stressed out, constantly like the threat of being sued by my customers. Like I was in the construction niche, which is just a brutal industry to make a living in. And so I started exploring other opportunities. That ad came across my news feed. I applied, spoke to the salesperson, and at the time, his coaching program was like 10 grand for the year. Like it was very
Wow.
early stages of his coaching program. And so I sat down and I said, "Hey," I was talking to my wife. I said, I would really like to do this. I think this is what I need." And she was totally supportive. She's like, "Okay, let's do it." And so was it scary? Yes, but I had 100% faith in myself to make it happen. Halfway through that engagement, that coaching program, I ended up leaving my job, maybe even sooner than that. So I was doing this full time. I was all in, not making a ton of money. I mean, when I say not making a ton of money, it was really no money. I mean,
Mm.
I might be making $100 here and there, a couple of sales here and there, testing some offers. I did end up getting some traction with like um, coaching programs for engineering students. Like they were paying me, I think, $1,000 for like unlimited coaching as a tutor. It
Mm.
wasn't really coaching; it was really tutoring services. So I didn't sell many of those, maybe 5 to 10
Mhm.
total, and like it wasn't in a short time. It was like over
Yeah.
months and months. So, I had some cash flow coming in, like getting some, payments here and there, but I was also spending money on ads. And so, it was nerve wracking, but I
Mhm.
bet on myself. I knew that I was going to make it one way or another. And I was running out of cash. And this is kind of like, this is the big domino that kind of fell. I actually reached out to Russell asking to like work for him. Like when I was getting to the end of my rope, before I even became known as the webinar guy, I said, "Hey, I know you're running ads, like getting people into the coaching program. I love this coaching program. I really did. Like, even though the results weren't coming right away, I loved everything that I was learning. I said, can I sell for you?" And he politely told me no. He didn't have any room for salespeople. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But that's when he introduced me to the first webinar client. And he didn't introduce me as like the webinar guy, but this webinar person was looking for salespeople to follow up with all of his leads that didn't buy.
Mm.
And so we got connected. His name was Jason, awesome guy. Still talk to him today, to this day. And he's like, "Hey, man, go follow up with these leads, watch my webinar so you know what we're selling, and let's make some deals." So I watched his webinar. I'm like, "Man, this sucks." I said it in more polite terms, but I'm like, I mean, why don't I work on your webinar first?
Mm.
Like, I'll still follow up the leads. That's what he wanted me to do initially. Why don't I work on your webinar first and then I'll follow up the leads? Like, that's fine. I hate doing webinars. The only reason why I'm doing it is because Russell told me to.
Mm.
And so the rest is history. So I redid his entire webinar and I pitched it for him. Like I delivered it for him live, and that's when everything changed. So we ended up making, he was making about one sale a week of his $1,000 program. The first time that I did it, we did 14 sales, and you know, the rest was history. I'm like, I don't need to follow up these leads on the phone. Let me just keep doing these webinars. Like, deal.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah. So, it was grit. It was never giving up. It was looking for any opportunity possible,
Mm.
even when I wasn't looking for that exact opportunity, and taking it. Um, and that's when the doors open. Um, I think more and more people can learn from that, follow that experience, because it's never a straight line path for entrepreneurship. There's always pivots. There's always, you know, different ways of progressing that you think are possible. And that's one thing that I know about myself is that I'll always find a way, no matter what happens. I still go through downs, ups and downs in entrepreneurship today. It never goes away. They just change and they become bigger problems. They become more impactful. And it's always just looking for the new opportunities. It's always looking for different ways to solve a problem, being creative and figuring out what works for you.
Awesome, awesome. And when you mention about like you getting that first client and pitching for him, like what were the deliverables? Where you built the funnel and you mentioned pitching like so were you on the camera actually pitching his offer or you had to because I was watching one of your interviews with Onyx and Gal, you mentioned with webinars you wanted to be on like white and black text, white background and yeah, moving. So were you live on the call with your face on it or like what was that process like?
Yeah, the first iterations that I did for Jason, I was delivering his entire webinar,
Wow.
start to finish. So he didn't even show up. Or he might. I think he showed up at the end for like Q&A. So he was there, but he wasn't delivering. He wasn't pitching the content.
Mm,
So, you know, it took about 2 weeks for me to get there. Like I took his slide deck, I took his presentation, I reworked it, made it much more appealing. Like redid all the content, reorganized it so it was more impactful,
mm,
repositioned his offer, and then I delivered it that first week, and that's when all the changes, like that's when the most impacts happened. So then I just kept doing that week after week after week after week after week, meaning I would be the one showing up live, delivering it, and closing the deals. Jason would show up at the end and do some Q&A. So that was the deal that I had with him. I think what you're referring to with my interview with Anik was when I invented and pioneered the mini webinar, which is a different style
mm,
and also different goals. Mini webinars are typically used for booking a call, pre-selling leads on higher ticket offers, higher end offers, and that's what I after being in the webinar game for so long, I pioneered the mini webinar because I realized there were lots of leads, lots of high end leads that were ready to buy right now,
mhm,
but they were just going through the wrong sales process. So the mini webinar kind of reversed the flow,
mhm.
led with the offer up front, then gave them kind of like the need to know context of how you're going to fulfill on whatever that core promise is, whatever that offer is, and then ultimately getting them to submit an application or book a call. So that was like the next evolution of where I went after live webinars.
Amazing. And how long did it take you from you diving into like the webinar, the standard one, until you pioneering the mini webinar? Because like it's really I watched the interview you mentioned that you have like seven key things most people like get wrong. So maybe we might talk about it later. But what was the process of you? Okay, you're doing standard webinar, something you've learned from yourself. So actually, okay, this really isn't working. Let me create something new. Like, how was that process?
Well, in like 2015, 2016, there started to be a movement towards high ticket, right?
Mm,
Lots of people wanted to, sell coaching programs, and there were people out there that were kind of teaching the webinar model, but instead of the call to action at the end being buy a course, the call to action was, hey, book a call and sell a more premium version of that program. So I would get a lot of clients that were coming to me and wanted a webinar with a book a call model. And we would have success. And I remember just going through many of these webinars and we would get to the end like, okay, what's the core promise of your offer? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, we're burying this way too far down the sales process because with any webinar, there's going to be natural attrition of just people who register, show up, watch until a certain point, and like there's drop off everywhere. And so it was expensive just to get someone to see the offer. And there were many offers where I'm like, this is such a good offer. Like, we need to just put this out in front, like
yeah.
first and foremost. And nobody was doing that. No one was doing that. Everyone was saying, run a webinar and go, do the whole dog and pony show. And I tested this out first with myself and I crushed it. Meaning I was running a long form webinar to sell my webinar consulting, services, et cetera, et cetera. And I did that because I wanted to be congruent, but it was very, very costly for me. My average cost per booked appointment was like $400, $500.
Mm,
We were profitable, but like it just wasn't scalable. It wasn't sustainable. Now, there are other sub benefits of running a webinar funnel that don't happen at the immediate sale. It's great for branding. You do build a lot of, trust with your audience. They are learning. So you're putting a lot of goodwill into the marketplace, and you're building a good relationship with those new leads that just opt into your list. So that's definitely something that happens with a webinar funnel, but ultimately you still need to, like, you got to get paid. Like, you got to make your, you got to make money. And I had a salesperson, he was closing the deals for me. So I was paying him, like, I don't know, 15 or 20% commission, which was a lot. I didn't know any better at the time, but I was paying him a good chunk of all the revenue, paying for the ads, and then I'd be working with these clients, and it just, it was very difficult to scale. $400 to $500 per booked appointment, like that's tough. So anyway, I tested it with myself where I said, you know what? I bet you there are plenty of people in my market that already know they want a webinar. They just are struggling with getting it live, getting it finished, getting it completed, or, trying to make it convert. So I said, why don't I create a campaign that targets those people? Like, because my webinar was designed to educate the unaware, like introduce people to why webinars are great, why everyone needs a webinar, what are the benefits of a webinar. So it's just naturally going to cost me more money to educate that market and ultimately convince them to apply to work with me and join my program. When in reality, there was already marketing softwares out there. Like Webinar Jam was very big, EverWebinar was very big, ClickFunnels had a webinar platform, and there were more. So it's very clear that there were already people who wanted a webinar. They didn't need to be convinced on why they needed a webinar. So I just shifted my messaging to speak to those people. And I put together a very, very quick, like 10-minute mini webinar, I called it. It was before I coined it, the mini webinar, because I wanted to speak to those people who were, trying and failing and just wanted someone to help them get it done now. And when I launched it, my cost per acquisition dropped by 90%. I went from, $400 per book call to $40 per book call instantly, overnight. And I'm like, wow, there's something here. And so that was the start of the mini webinar experience and pioneering the mini webinar. And now that is the norm. Like,
Mm.
I've probably consulted with like 80% of all the big name marketers out there who run their own mini webinar or VSL, whatever you want to call it. But it's the same concept. Like, they're leading with the core promise up front instead of leading with an education based hook, and they're running book a call funnels that way. And they're using the same framework that I taught them inside of the mini webinar, and it's really become a staple of the internet marketing industry. So that was in 2016 when I rolled that out and started to talk to people about it, teach them the process, teach them the methodology, etc.
Awesome, awesome. And another thing that you mentioned, you said something about like with the mini webinar that most people get wrong. So if you can like share, okay, what someone is trying to build a mini webinar, what are some of the things that they need to get right? You've mentioned one which is state the offer upfront. What next?
For the mini webinar specifically,
Yeah.
okay, so number one is they got to get their core promise dialed in. And that's
Mm,
where we start with a power offer, right? A power offer is essentially, an upfront promise that speaks to, what it is that they really want, and approaching, and combating all of the things that they hate doing. So my first, like, that's how you hook them in. That's how you get qualified leads coming in to view your mini webinar. That's the ad, right?
mm,
It doesn't have to be an ad. It can be anywhere that you publish this stuff. If you have an audience anywhere, I would run this. If you have an email list, social media, you name it. I've had clients do this with magazine ads. But it really starts with getting qualified traffic to view your mini webinar. And that is all about framing of, hey, number one, I'm looking for clients to help. Like, this is not a free training.
mm,
Um, and number two, here's my core promise. So the first mini webinar, or I'm sorry, the first power offer that I launched was for my webinar services. And it was something along the lines of, attention course creators, if I offer to help you launch a high converting webinar in the next 24 hours without you needing to worry about what to say or how to say it, guaranteed to convert. Would you take me up on that offer? Right.
Mm,
So it's a question framed as it's an offer framed as a question. And anyone who reads that is they have to be in some sort of consideration stage of wanting to get that thing done.
mm,
Okay. Now that's step one is getting the right framing and front end messaging positioned so you get qualified leads coming in the door. Step two is now if they are pre-framed with that messaging, the next natural question that they're going to ask is, okay, I'm interested, but how do you do it? And that's where the mini webinar comes in. So the mini webinar then takes those people and explains the how. And
mm,
your how has to be strategically designed so you are giving them the perspective shifts of why what they've been doing in the past has not worked and what about your process and methodology is different. Everybody is like, if you want to speak to someone in the consideration stage, the only thing that you really need to be doing is strategically addressing what have they tried and failed, or what's their current belief and why is that false, or what's the new way versus the old way. Like those three things of positioning is all you need to do throughout your mini webinar is position your mechanism and your methodology as this is why I do what I do, and it's because most people think this is the way that they need to have success or accomplish whatever goal that they have. And so you do that a handful of times throughout your mini webinar. And that's meant to just strategically inform them of your process, get them to buy into your methodology, and then continue on through booking a call or applying to work with you or whatever it is. It's meant to introduce your methodology and your process in a way that positions you um, positively, positions you as an asset of value, and positions you as your way of doing something unique.
awesome. And for those who didn't catch that, a power offer is simply an offer that is framed as a question. Did I get it right, Clark? Then, and one of the things that you also mentioned was in the like just to backtrack, you were starting out getting into on the internet marketing game, and you actually got into high ticket. So that's how you got into that space. So the mini web is like a way of you like circling back to your roots and somewhat because like you're starting with the premium offer first before you mentioned something about dissension model. So like that's how you got into the marketing space and now you've gotten a lot of result based and most of the clients you work with are that also doesn't much result on that.
Correct. Yeah. So the positioning of that was, following the dissension model of, like I was targeting course creators and a
Mm,
lot of people, you know, I just want to make it clear, I am a student of the game of marketing. I
mm,
don't want to, I want to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from because I am of the standpoint that like everything has its place. Lead magnets have their place. Webinars have their place. Book a call funnels have their place. Low ticket offers have their place. I'm a student of the game, and my job is to really figure out which one works for the right situation.
mm,
So, where I advocate for mini webinars and high ticket offers, with the dissension model, where you're starting with high ticket first, then scaling down, is in markets that have very clear indication that there's a need for your services, and um, where you can get them results by working with them on an intimate basis versus trying to start with ascension first, meaning a free lead magnet, then a tripwire offer, then the next core offer, and the next core offer. Now, I still believe those things work, but there's pros and cons to everything. So dissension models and power offers and mini webinars are great for like the market will tell you whether or not they want it or not. Like if you go into the internet marketing space right now and you follow the mini webinar book a call model, it's more challenging for you because everybody's doing it. Like it's become saturated. And so when something becomes saturated, now you're fighting with so much competition. They're used to the sales process. They're used to being made big, bold promises. Now, if you go outside of the internet marketing space and the funnel building space, those things still crush. Like we have multiple clients that have gone to do multiple eight figures with that process and they're still running with it just because they're in a market that is, you know, they're not used to that sales process. There's not a whole lot of competition. That's why anyone in the marketing space has to be aware of all the tools because their job as a marketer is to be able to apply the right tools at the right time for the
Mm.
right situation. If you're working with clients, like, okay, what are you going to advise for them? And just making sure that you align proper expectations. So I just want people to understand I'm not an advocate for like one size fits all. I study all marketing
Yeah,
and learn what's best for what.
amazing. And one of the things that you started doing was you're able to like now you're able to launch offers really fast, and you recently launched an application, a system to do that. So can you like walk us through, because now you're able to like get the ads, get the landing page, you're able to tweak one launch it faster, because that was one of the questions that came in. So how are you able to launch offers faster? Like you have an idea for an offer, then it's in the market and you're testing that. So if you can walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, everything comes down to everything like my methodology that I believe in, whether it's low ticket, high ticket, you name it, is your market will tell you paid advertising is the fastest way to know whether or not something will work.
Mm,
And I ran I run $100 advertising tests, whether I'm doing book a call funnels, mini webinars, or even low ticket funnels. And advertising networks have gotten so smart at finding your ideal buyers as long as you give it the right data. And I'm not talking about like what targeting features you put behind Facebook or any sort of ad platform. I'm more so saying like if your messaging is dialed in on your ad, then it will find your ideal customers and ideal buyers immediately. So when we would do this with book a call funnels, we would use power offers. If we are doing low ticket funnels, I use a very similar framework of a power offer, but I call them, mini sales page ads. I might come up with some other power offer terminology for
yeah.
it, but it is the same concept. Meaning, with low ticket offers, we will create these mini sales pages where it reveals the price in the ad. It reveals everything that they're going to be getting. And the core element that we're trying to test is that like the one thing that we know is like Facebook in particular, Meta, they they know who the rabid buyers are. And if
Mm,
you tell it like, "Hey, I'm going after purchases, here's my ad copy," they will put that in front of the impulse buyers and you will know without a shadow of a doubt whether or not you've got a great offer, you've got a great positioning, and we can acquire buyers for dirt cheap in the early stages because Facebook wants to feed us that low-hanging fruit.
mm,
And so what we look for is we look for irrefutable data in those early stages. And it's why I say we can test ads and we can test offers for under $100 because whether it's low ticket or high ticket, because when we first put that out there into the advertising ecosystem, it's going to give us the lowest cost per result possible very, very early on. Like I've got clients that have had zero social media presence, no followers on their Facebook page, zero presence at all online. We create their Facebook page, we write their minimum viable sales page, and then we launch these mini sales page ads. And we were acquiring customers for a $37 offer for under $8 a piece on day one. And like that's what we look for. It's like we have a rabid offer. We have something that people really want, and because eventually costs are going to go up. Like most people think that the pixel will optimize and gradually reduce your cost per lead, cost per book call, cost per sale. It's exactly the opposite. Like they give you the lowest hanging fruit first, so it can find more people like it, but also to give you that dopamine hit of wanting to keep spending more money. Understanding that, that's how we test offers. And if we can get those, that flood of sales early on, we know this is a hot offer that more people are going to want. So that's how we test it. And why we know we can test it for under $100 is because the ad does all the selling. By the time someone clicks on reading a mini sales page ad or power offer ad, they should be 90% of the way pre-sold on whatever it is that you have to offer on the next page.
And how does like the Inspired app also like come into play in all this process?
Yeah, Inspired was really designed to be a market intelligence tool and an AI assistant to help you give you more iterations and more ideas for ads or organic content that are already proven to work in the marketplace. And so, if it's okay, I can give a demo and kind of show you like behind the scenes of like what
Sure.
that looks like.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's it.
So I'll share my screen real quick. Uh, I just need access. Okay. So So, as marketers, a lot of us, we are studying ads. We are students of the game, right? And the main problem that we run into is always needing to start from scratch, starting over and over and over and over from scratch. And this is why marketers build what we call swipe files. They're collections of, winning ads or winning, content or winning copy that we wish that we wrote ourselves. Like we'll read it like, oh my goodness, that's really powerful copy, or that's a
Yes.
really powerful ad. I wish I wrote that myself, right? Well, Inspired is meant to be a market intelligence tool that you can feed it winning ads, you can feed it winning content, and then it's going to go in the background and start to recreate it for your brand or for your client's brand. So we built it with that as the precipice of not trying to steal other people's work, but taking winning frameworks and taking winning formulas and applying it to your products. So keeping that in the back of your mind, that's the premise of what we did with Inspired. The way it works is it's a two-part tool. The first part is a repository and a collection of everything that you've saved, everything that you've clipped, and it starts to be this living, breathing swipe file that now becomes your automated marketing assistant. So it starts to learn what type of content that you like. It starts to go out there. In the very, very near future, we're talking in a couple of weeks, we are going to have features where Inspired is going to now follow creators that you like, and it's going to automatically extract any new content, any new ads that they're launching, and it's going to start to learn. And then it's going to start to present suggestions to you for new content or new ads that you can write. And it will ask you, hey, Russell Brunson just, over the past week, Russell Brunson published 3 podcasts, 7 social media posts, and a handful of ads. We, based on what you have said you've liked in the past, we found 3 new angles for your potential products. Would you like me to write them? Right. And so it's meant to be like almost your marketing butler, your personalized marketing butler, where it's going to present you ideas either daily or weekly at whatever frequency that you want. So you never have to start from scratch. It's always working. It's always learning. It's always researching what's working out there. Does that make sense so far,
Yeah,
Alex?
that makes complete sense.